So what I'd like to, spend a few moments on today is talking about the challenge and the opportunity in Australia for chemical recycling in particular, and the circular plastic economy more broadly. So my name's Andrea Polson. I work for a Australian technology development company called Licella. And I guess a good place to start is, this in 2019 was a paper published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which talked about the importance of the circular economy to realising net zero carbon emissions globally. And that if we only solve for energy with renewable energy, we only get about halfway there in terms of net zero. What we need to be looking at is those hidden emissions in the products that we use every day. So 45% of global emissions actually come from the products that we use. And that includes plastic. And so a circular economy for plastic is really an essential part of reaching net zero. And so part of circular economy, and we've had some amazing case studies and technologies and solutions showcased over the last few days, which is fantastic. And I think there isn't a silver bullet, and we need all of these things to come online and accelerate. And we can talk about maybe some of the barriers and opportunities to that, but chemical recycling or advanced recycling, referring, I guess, to the same thing, is one part of the solution. And what it does do is it provides a continuously circular economy for plastic that is not able to be mechanically recovered or recycled. So I like the previous session when the lady from Reverse Garbage talked about the waste hierarchy, and she said actually it's a resource hierarchy. I really like that. I think that I'll be using that moving forward. But when we look about the resource hierarchy, of course, ultimately we want to try to avoid and reduce where we can and then reuse. And there's some wonderful reuse initiatives that were spoken about. Then when we get to, okay, we can't avoid it, we can't reuse it, we need to recycle it. So we know that within recycling there are various different options, and just looking at plastic in particular here, we have mechanical recycling of plastic and advanced or chemical recycling of plastic. So what chemical recycling does is it takes plastic back a step. So rather than physically processing and reprocessing, we actually take it back to its chemical building blocks, which is a synthetic oil. So plastic, which is made from fossil oil, refined fossil oil, we actually like unbaking the cake and taking it back to its base ingredients. Now, the benefit of doing that is that we can process mixed plastics without needing to sort them by type. So we can take a mix of polyethylenes and polypropylenes, and we can even take multi-layered packaging. So we don't need to mechanically and physically separate plastics by types, which is a big advantage, particularly when it comes to packaging, as packaging can be very complex, made up of a number of different plastics which aren't possible to mechanically separate. Another study that was done last year, actually, out of Europe, was a life cycle analysis which looked at the importance of mechanical and chemical recycling in conjunction together and where they fit. And what it demonstrated is that all recycling is preferable to energy recovery or waste to energy. So again, where we can recycle it, we absolutely should before it goes to waste to energy, but there is a place within the waste hierarchy or the resource hierarchy for waste to energy. Hydrothermal liquefaction, which is the category of technology that Licella have, which I'll talk about a bit more detail in a moment, had a global warming potential which was around 50% lower than pyrolysis, traditional pyrolysis plastic to oil technology. And again, I'll talk about why when we get there in a moment. And then the other thing about hydrothermal liquefaction using water is that we can process quite a wide range of plastics, which makes it a complementary technology to existing mechanical recycling, because we're not competing with mechanical recycling for plastic feedstock. We want to offer a circular solution for plastic that isn't currently recycled. So looking at how a circular economy works with chemical recycling, what we can do is just starting from the beginning. So step one there on the top right, you can see some of the examples of types of plastic which we've processed through our chemical recycling platform, whether it is return to store, post-consumer plastics, back of house, soft plastics, curbside trials, other problematic plastic streams such as those contaminated with paint or other chemicals, and then other, streams of plastic not currently recycled or difficult to recycle, such as those used in agriculture. Ultimately, what we're doing is converting those plastics to an oil. That oil is chemically equivalent to a refined fossil oil, so it can be co-processed in existing refinery infrastructure to produce post-consumer recycled plastic via what we refer to as a mass balance approach, which means for every barrel of oil that we produce from plastic is one less barrel of oil that we need to produce from fossil. So it's reducing our reliance on fossil resources and providing a continuously circular economy for plastic. So we're taking as much of the carbon, which is the stuff that we want to reduce and reuse and recycle, and recirculating that back through the supply chain to reduce the amount of fossil oil ultimately we're using. So what we would like to see is if we are able to continue to circulate those carbon molecules, then we actually don't need to dig more oil out of the ground to make plastic. And the yields from hydrothermal liquefaction are actually pretty high, so there's not a lot of yield loss through the process. We did actually demonstrate this back in 2021 with Nestle and a collaborative industry initiative, which was a pilot where we were able to demonstrate using Australian technology, Australian infrastructure, and the local petrochemical and plastic packaging chain that we could do it right here. So we have everything we need here in Australia. What we need to do is really look at what is it going to take us to get this happening at scale. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to say that essentially how the process works is mixed plastic is prepared. We melt and pressurise it and then mix it with hot pressurised water. So hot compressed water. Water is actually our chemical which controls the conversion of the plastic to oil. So from there, the melted plastic reacts with the hot pressurised water and it breaks apart on a chemical level and reforms into oil. So the end product of our process is 85% of the plastic goes to oil and 15% is a high energy gas which can be used back through the process as energy. And you can see there on the right hand side the synthetic oil that's produced from the process, which is again goes back into the plastic supply chain to offset fossil. So because this is a solutions-based conference, we were asked to think about being solutions-focused, and I think every one of us here understands the challenges of plastic and some of the problems. But again, what is really needed to drive action? And I think we need to acknowledge that economics drive action, and without fixing the economics, and there's a number of ways we can do that, and it's probably a combination of a few of these things, but whether it's in-market incentives, redirecting fossil subsidies towards a circular economy, disincentivising the use of virgin plastic, or increasing the landfill levy. And maybe it is a combination of many of these things, but until we fix the economics, we will continue to take, make, use, dispose. So we need to fix that in order to help drive action. Investment capital as well. So in a system with a lack of policy as far as a mandate on recycled content or any clear direction to industry yet to be announced, it's very difficult to unlock private investment capital for emerging technologies. And I think, in conjunction with policy, we need to have transparency within the system, and that is really going to underpin the investment confidence as well. So how do we address the lack of confidence? And I think there's a couple of considerations. One is to build assurance around feedstock, so feedstock being what's going to go in the front end of these facilities. And we need to do that in a way that doesn't destroy an emerging value chain. So we can't have people camping on feedstock as a commodity. It's a complex issue, but essentially we need to look at what are the mechanisms to put in place and what's the role of government to facilitate that. And as well, how do we regain the trust from the community in recycling more broadly? And I think we can't underestimate the importance of communicating the benefits, getting that social license prior to asking more of the community in terms of collection and aggregation. And I think that these are all essential enablers of a true circular economy and a systems approach. So how do we fix a broken system? And really, we need to look at the whole system, because at each part in the system there will be changes that need to happen, whether that's investing in MRFs to make sure that we can recover these streams of plastics that are not currently recovered, like flexible plastic. How can governments support collaboration between parts of the supply chain that don't play nicely in the sandpit together? And what are the eco-modulated schemes and EPR schemes, so extended producer responsibility schemes, that perhaps we could bring online to generate revenue to reinvest in those missing or broken parts of the supply chain? So yeah, just a top-line view of some of the rather complex problems in the system. But without, to leave on a positive, I do think that it is possible. We demonstrated at a pilot scale that it is possible to build a local circular economy for plastic packaging, but it does require a system-wide change and approach. And I think that this will only be achieved through bold, brave, and collective action. Thank you.